Hey everyone, welcome to Arcadology. My name is Kevin. On today's episode, I spoke with Dylan, also known as Belmont Boy, about modding and his ultimate Skyrim project. As a matter of background and transparency, Dylan and I have known each other for a few years, and I am a Patreon supporter of his. But without much further ado, let's get on to the interview. So, Dylan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man.
For the people listening at home, just tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do.
So I'm trying to transition into a full-time content creator. I make a mod pack called Ultimate Skyrim, which is a large compilation of mods that I make them all work together the best that I can, because there are a lot of conflicts and balance issues that result from, smashing together the work of many different people who all have their own, design philosophies and methods of working. So that's probably my primary gig, is maintaining and developing Ultimate Skyrim. And on the side, I produce video content for my YouTube channel, and I've recently started streaming as well.
How did you get started modding?
I've always been interested in installing mods for, just games that I play ever since I was a kid. But the first mod that I ever made was for Oblivion, and it was like a small edit to a housing mod that I had downloaded, like some really cool castle. I've always been very partial to housing mods and having my own little spot in these Bethesda RPGs. And there was like an alchemy tower that I thought would be greatly enhanced by having a trash can. So I wanted to put a trash can into the alchemy tower. It was the first personal modification I ever did. And from that point, I never actually had that much interest in creating my own mods until I got really into Skyrim modding. Like I said, there's just so many little conflicts and problems that arise. I don't think that a lot of people want to get into modding when they're talking about like conflict resolution.
Yeah.
It was more out of necessity. I wanted the game to work a certain way, and there wasn't really any way to smash those bugs or to get it working smoothly without learning how to do it myself. So I kind of started out just fixing little conflicts here and there, and then, I don't know, that just kind of blew up into its own thing.
To me, it almost sounds like when you hear of people like flipping houses, right? So they're looking at houses and they go into a place and they say, yeah, this place has good bones, right? They
Sure.
can see the potential that is not currently there. And you and I have spoken before, and that's kind of where you see Skyrim. It's a game you love that has this potential that is not quite fully realized by the base game itself.
Yes, I think that is a perfect analogy. That's way better than I could have phrased it.
That kind of gets into your inspiration for Ultimate Skyrim, is seeing that potential. So was there a particular moment where you realized, this is something I really feel I need to do? And you had mentioned to me once that you had only put about 60 hours into the base game of Skyrim, just the vanilla version, and that's pretty much a single playthrough of the game, is about 60 hours by my
That's
estimate.
about what it was.
So what was the trigger for Ultimate Skyrim in your mind?
So about after that 60 hours, that was when I try my best to experience these games, especially the Bethesda games, when the modding communities are just going to have a field day over the next few years. I like to experience them, vanilla the first time through, see what I like, see what I don't like. And with Skyrim, maybe it was just the time in my life when I had the wherewithal and the means to mod the game more intensely. But as mods started coming out, I started pouring more and more in. Because, like you said before, I felt so strongly that Skyrim it had so much potential to be this really amazing experience, but there were these areas in which it just missed the mark. So it always kind of felt like I was just one small step away from, modding the game, throwing in some new mod that was going to make it exactly what I wanted it to be.
Right.
Over time, as more and more mods came out, the Skyrim modding community is absolutely insane. Just the talent of the modders, and also the breadth of the mods available, I would say, is just insane. So every time I kind of thought that I had made the game into what I really wanted it to be, someone would come along with another new mod that, you know, kind of got me thinking about a sector of the gameplay or a sector of the experience that I had not previously considered. And I would be like, oh my God, it's just, well, I got to throw that one in there too.
Right.
So it was basically 5 years of off and on Skyrim playing. I would mod the game like crazy. I would honestly, I think a lot of Skyrim modders will tell you, or a lot of modders in general will tell you, that they almost spend more time modding the game than playing, and almost derive the most enjoyment from modding the game. And I'm kind of one of those too.
Yeah, it becomes a hobby in and of itself.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
Just seeing the tweaking and the results that come from that tweaking.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times we've seen Ultimate Skyrim users who will, you know, because it's currently still a kind of a pain to install, but they'll get all the way through the installation and spend, you know, a dozen hours doing it, and then immediately start adding their own tweaks and adding their own mods to the configuration. It's so funny to see, because modding really is the hobby. I spent that 5 years kind of off and on. I would check back in, you know, every so often with the community to see what kind of new stuff had come out. And around 2016, like halfway through, when things had started to settle down a little bit, that was when I finally thought that I could, for sure this time, get all the mods that had been made by that point and then mash them together and create my perfect Skyrim experience, so to speak. And that was kind of the genesis of it.
Do you have people assisting you with working out some of the bugs and the kinks that would inevitably occur with trying to jam all these mods together into an install package?
Yes, absolutely. So I have what I call the Ultimate Skyrim team, excuse me. And that is kind of my, the people who work directly with me on development. I have it's like a handful, I would say, like 5 people. The people who actually help me with developing new content would be Senor Gato Negro, who is like one of my right-hand men. He really takes care. I mean, everyone kind of does a little bit of everything, but Gato is a proficient coder, and that is easily my worst skill if it comes to the skill set that you need, to develop mods. I have a friend named Novakini who also helps with bug testing and with more of like the X-edit work. That's one of the tools that we use to mod Skyrim. My primary tool, really. And then I also have members of the team who will bug test themselves, but mostly help other users who are experiencing bugs or experiencing installation problems. Other than them, that would be Zod and Runewolf. And then we also have a 5th member of our team who's kind of independent of the installation itself, but he is working on several external utilities that are supposed to help the installation process. That's kind of separate. But other than them, we have an entire community of users who very much seem to enjoy talking about their experiences with the installation, and that inevitably includes bugs. So we have a little spot on our Discord channel where they can report bugs and tell us the details of it. We try and walk them through what they've been experiencing to figure out if it actually is a bug or if it's something that just, you know, is working a way that they didn't expect. And from that, we get a lot of very useful feedback that we can reincorporate into development to squash those, because there are a lot. Oh my God. So many.
It's I can imagine. I just think it's so cool that it's gone from kind of a passion project of yours to something that I remember you announcing on your YouTube channel. Was it a year and a half ago now?
Just about. I think Gato was talking the other day about how the first release version of Ultimate Skyrim was about like a year ago, and I had been developing it for about 6 months on top of that.
Yeah.
That's about a year and a half.
I mean, it's just so cool to me to see something small that you took, this project that you took, and see it grow and mature over the past year or so into something that has a pretty dedicated fan following at this point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate it, and I agree with you that it has been a real trip to see it develop in that way. Especially when it started out as just something that I was doing for myself, right?
Right.
And that was about when you and I were first coming up with our YouTube channels.
Right.
And when I got the idea of showing off the installation on the channel, it was kind of funnily enough, I never even intended on making Ultimate Skyrim like available to other people.
Yeah.
because it just seemed like such a daunting task.
Right.
And the particular climate, we'll call it, of the Ultimate Skyrim modding community is not super conducive to large mod packs. It's very conducive to individual mods, but not to the packs. So I never really intended on having it be this installable thing.
Right.
But eventually, when I first released the videos and people saw me playing it, the demand grew for other people to play it, and I kind of realized that it would be a real shame if I had this installation and other people weren't able to play it, and it was a tremendous opportunity to kind of make something and watch it grow. And since that point, it's just been absolutely insane, like the way that the project has kind of morphed and evolved.
So for people who haven't necessarily been following, we've been talking about Ultimate Skyrim as this large mod pack that gets added to the base game. Could you kind of explain what's the core of the goal with Ultimate Skyrim? What does it do to the game that makes the game much more enjoyable and replayable? What's the goal of it?
The little pitch that I have written on like the subreddit, and I think somewhere on like the Nexus page for Ultimate Skyrim, is to create the ultimate adventure simulator. That's the very fancy sounding basic pitch. What that means on a functional level to me is transforming Skyrim from a power fantasy into a simulation environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think, not that there's anything wrong with power fantasies, of course. There's many games that I'm sure we both enjoy that kind of fit that.
Right.
But that's definitely what Skyrim is in the base game. It's definitely it's not meant to be super challenging. You can challenge yourself in Skyrim vanilla in certain ways, but it's not really intended to be super challenging. It's more of like a it's like a facade in a way, and that sounds mean. I don't mean it to be, but it is kind of what it is.
I get what you're saying there. It's obviously the game is it has a whole bunch of systems, and over top of that, it has what it wants you to think it is. Right?
Exactly. That is exactly correct. And it's definitely it's tricky because you hear a lot of people talking about how the Elder Scrolls has been quote unquote dumbed down is the words that a lot of people like to use, and I understand that argument, and I can see how that creates a different type of experience than something like Morrowind, for example, which I think most people would say is the most like classic RPG Elder Scrolls game, if you don't count Arena and Daggerfall.
Right.
But I think a result of this kind of power fantasy attitude of Skyrim is that the game itself is way more popular and is way more widespread, and there's more people than ever before who are just super interested and super captivated by the world of Skyrim. And I think that maybe Bethesda made the game the way, like, as they did to keep that widespread appeal and to make sure that people were not alienated by too much difficulty or things of that nature.
Right.
However, I think, or I kind of, this is my belief, the point that I have faith in is that a lot of users, not everybody, but a lot of users who enjoy the base game would enjoy even more a game that was properly challenging in ways that made sense. I think that what people really like about Skyrim is kind of inhabiting this world that feels like a realistic place that kind of exists outside of your own character.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something where vanilla Skyrim it definitely lacks the more you play it. The more you play it, the more you kind of realize that the whole world revolves around you, that all of the challenges and the characters that you meet and just everything kind of going on is more of a cardboard cutout than it is like an actual present part of the world. And so I guess the overarching goal of Ultimate Skyrim for me is to really transform the world into a place with interacting systems that are constantly interacting, whether or not you are interacting with them. It just really kind of add to like the dynamic feel of it in that way, so that when you do something cool in the world, it really feels special, you know, as opposed to how it is in the vanilla game.
I just want to harp on a thing that you said where the player character feels like the world basically revolves around them. And that's actually something that I'm very curious to dig into in other games. And it's an interesting concept. And I feel like there's a few games, it's very hard to pull off in a single player game, right?
Are you talking about the feel of
the world? That the world is not created to just revolve around you. It's
right,
tough
because
to do that.
It literally is.
It literally is. It is. So any effort to kind of pull away from that ultimately is obviously it's a little bit of a misdirection from the way the systems are created in the game.
Yeah, almost like an inherent paradox of some kind.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, MMOs, obviously, they're created to be shared experiences. Games like Destiny, or, you know, we have Anthem off on the horizon, or other games of that nature. They're obviously created to be this shared experience. It's very rare for a single player game to be able to pull that off, where, you know, the character, you as the player character, could feel like, oh, if I weren't here, this world would continue to exist and things would continue to happen.
Right.
And I feel like when a game does pull that off, it actually is able to really hit home for the player character that, oh, I'm affecting some sort of a real change. And obviously it's not real change. It's all virtual, but it's
right within the context of
the context of your gameplay. Yeah.
Right. If this world were real, I am having an impact on it. That is definitely like one of the things that we aim for.
That's a good goal. It's a very tough target to hit, but I think it's a good and it's a fascinating goal to aim for.
Sure. I mean, I agree with you. I think that we would both probably agree on this. I don't want to speak for you, but I know we've played a lot of RPGs over the course of our lives that we've talked about in the past. And for me personally, some of my favorite RPGs are those games that manage to blur the line between the fictitious and like real world that you're like participating in. Even it's like, so you have games like the BioWare RPGs, right? And you mentioned Anthem.
Right.
You know, the Anthem is kind of intended to be something very different from a typical BioWare RPG. But the BioWare RPGs that you could argue are very much like facades in a sense, because they don't, you know, if you go from one planet to the next, nothing's going on at the other planet you just left. Nothing that isn't intentionally, scripted, but there is this particular effort to create this faux simulation through intentional scripted stuff, right? So that like if you go to one planet, you do, you know, whatever the next step in the story is, the next step in the story after that will be you returning to some previous planet where things have actually changed because they were specifically programmed that way. They're trying to create this feel, right, that you are impacting the world through your actions by progressing along a relatively linear story path. It's crazy to think that that's something, that kind of a impactful feeling is something you might be able to create in a sandbox environment as opposed to like a linear story progression.
Right.
And that is kind of what we are trying to do. It's what I feel like some, it's like the Mark Brown video on the rise of systemic games. He was talking about just how there's so many different games that are coming out, some multiplayer, some single player, that are really focusing on these kind of interactive systems, right? That you have systems that kind of function autonomously, that can interact in interesting ways and make the world feel dynamic and dynamic as opposed to static. Games like RimWorld, or even like your old school like Dwarf Fortress, right? Whereas in the past, like an experience like Dwarf Fortress is reserved for like the niche of the niche, and now you have all these different people who are able to experience these systemic games because they're being presented in these packages that are a lot more user friendly. A game like RimWorld, I think, is a great example of that.
Right.
And this is what kind of fuels my faith that so many players who play a game like Skyrim, are looking for that and think that they're getting it in a game like Skyrim until they play it long enough to have the curtain kind of fall down, see how everything is kind of geared specifically around them, and it's not quite the dynamic experience they imagined.
Right.
And so it's just a very interesting prospect to be able to provide that experience, right? Like in a package that is Skyrim related, because the base game in and of itself is so wonderful in so many ways.
Right.
Just not that way.
It's
in my
clean.
opinion.
It's a very clean, polished package, and it allows people to experience something that, as you said, is typically found in more niche titles. Dwarf Fortress is one. Another game I would throw out there as, I mean, it's popular, but I still feel it's kind of niche, is EVE Online. I mean,
absolutely.
The entire world is player driven.
Player driven, yeah. It is. Oh my God, EVE Online.
But I was like, that's a little too intense for me. I think I need something a little more entry level before I got into that.
I'm in the same boat with you there. EVE Online is one of those games that absolutely fascinates me. And it's just, I mean, all the EVE Online players are the first people to tell you that it's like a second job in terms of how much time and effort you dedicate to it. But there's experiences there that I don't think you can get anywhere else in games.
No, absolutely
that's
not.
why it's an interesting prospect to me to be able to borrow like a little bit of that, right? Like borrow a little bit of that dynamic experience and be able to transplant it into something a little bit more user-friendly.
Right. So what's your process for determining what gets added to Ultimate Skyrim in terms of mods? Because I know that, you will add some and then you might have to take some out or replace some. So how do you go through that vetting process?
So the first basic, it's changed over the course of the installation, I think, as my own abilities have changed and as the community has grown. But at the most basic level, I'm always trolling for new mods. Most of the time at this point, I'm very lucky in this regard in that the community will typically alert me to new and interesting mods coming out before I'm able to keep up with them myself, before I'm able to hear about them. But so I'll hear about a new mod, or I'll see a mod linked, in some discussion online that I'm looking at, and I'll just kind of look at it, see what it looks like, see what it claims to do and what the features are. And I have a pretty clear vision for what I want the ultimate Skyrim experience to be, so to speak. So usually off the bat, I know kind of like a gut instinct whether or not this is something that I think will make a good fit for the installation. Now with kind of the team that I have behind me, and one of the big things here is I was going to say that like the growth of my own abilities as a modder, we'll say, because I'm the first to tell you that I still consider myself like a intermediate modder.
Right.
At best. I think that the skill set that I've developed from mashing mods together, I might be a little bit more experienced than others with that specific process, but on the whole, I would still consider myself a very intermediate modder. But between the team that I have and the rise of communities like the Requiem community, for example, because everything in Ultimate Skyrim is built around the Requiem overhaul. That is the soul of Ultimate Skyrim.
Yeah.
With all of these people who are, working on these mods and working on kind of editing them to be what they want them to be, and with the increase in my own skills and the team that I have behind me, it's more and more possible now to take a mod, to look at it, to like what it does, but not like other things that it does, and still integrate it while kind of piecemealing it.
Right.
If that makes sense. Because in the past, when I first started, when I really didn't know how to do anything like that, where it was either all or nothing.
Right.
If I liked a mod, what it did, but it had elements that I didn't like, I basically just had to make a cost evaluation right then and there. Is it worth including the parts that I don't like for what I do? And if not, I just leave it out completely. So now it's like I look at the mod, I see what it does, I try and anticipate what the obstacles might be to implementing it, which is much easier to do as my own skills have developed. And if it's intriguing enough, I'll download it, I'll pop it into Xedit, which is my primary tool for modding. Makes it very easy to diagnose conflicts and things like that, kind of at a glance. And then I just look at it from the internals. I look at how it's constructed. I look at what it might take to integrate it with the rest of the installation, which I know pretty well now. And I just I have a big list at any given time of mods that are intriguing to me. It's a huge list, to be honest. And this is one of the things, it's both daunting and exciting to me that past the next big release that we have planned, which is Ultimate Skyrim 4.0, I still feel like there's so much left to do and so many things that I would love to add in. So hopefully we'll be able to get to them. But really, that's just it. I look at them from underneath the hood. I see what it'll take, and if something I absolutely love, then I'll add it to the essentials list, as I call it, where things that I definitively want going in, and it's just a matter of time or for the time to be right. Or it'll be to the non-essentials list, where it's like, this would be nice, or I think this might work out well, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. So we'll see. And that's generally my process.
Which version of Skyrim are you doing all this on? I know there's
several at this point.
There's several versions.
So Ultimate Skyrim, as of right now, is on the 32-bit version.
Got it.
Which is more by necessity than by choice.
Yeah.
There's really I would really love, so the versions of Skyrim are the 32-bit version, which is the classic, we'll call it, affectionately titled Old Rim by many. That's the version that came out in 2011 originally. Now you have Skyrim Special Edition, which is the one that came out, what was it, about a year ago, a little bit over?
Yeah, a little over a year ago. Yeah.
A little over a year. Which is it's Skyrim, but transferred to a 64-bit architecture. And then just recently you have Skyrim VR, which I believe it has to use the Special Edition 64-bit version as a framework. It has some sort of, I've seen people kind of having discussions about porting Special Edition mods over to Skyrim VR, so there must be something different about that version that is enough to make that an obstacle. But Ultimate Skyrim is currently on the classic version, the 32-bit. The real reason for that is just because many of the very core, very essential mods that Ultimate Skyrim utilizes have not been ported yet to Special Edition, the primary one being Requiem. There are people who have gotten unofficial versions of Requiem working with Special Edition.
Right.
But I'm personally a little bit uncomfortable using an unofficial version of Requiem's, mod.
Right. It's the core. So
it is the absolute core. One is just a matter of respect, because I know that the Requiem team is not a huge fan of these unofficial versions, and I can understand why. And the other reason is just the Requiem team. I have so much respect for what they do when they release something. Generally speaking, also the mod is huge, so it's just such a huge scope. And generally speaking, when they release a new version, it just has this level of polish and care that I absolutely love, and that I would be willing to wait for. When it comes to something like porting it over. But hopefully, in the relatively near future, we will be able to port Ultimate Skyrim over to Special Edition, just because, Old Rim, it's old.
Right.
It does its job valiantly, and so many of the modders have come out with mods that really increase the stability, that increase the performance. I like to say that Ultimate Skyrim runs about as well as a huge mod pack can run on that old 32-bit version. But it would be really nice to port the whole thing to Special Edition and utilize the new stability and the new kind of environment. And also just because I think that's the future of Skyrim modding. I think the community is still very active, but most of the big modders and the big names have transferred to Special Edition at this point. And a lot of them are very nice and still kind of support the legacy editions of their mods, but some don't either, and I don't really blame them for that.
No.
So hopefully one day soon. I know that Requiem, their team, is I can't say it'll be possible because I don't know, but I know they're looking into an unofficial port to Special Edition, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that within the near future.
I remember you mentioning to me once that there's different types of modders and modding communities. Could you speak broadly about that?
Sure. Well, so there is I'm when you emailed me the question, I think you're referring to the distinction between Cathedral modders and Parlor modders.
Yeah, Cathedral versus Parlor. Those are
Cathedral versus Parlor.
Those were the words you used.
So that is like a pretty general term used to describe modders. I mean, you can more or less say that every modder kind of fits into those two categories.
Right.
There are some kind of gray areas, but for the most part, Cathedral modders are. So let me first explain where the names come from. It refers to how modders feel their work can and should be treated. It refers to the permissions that people attach to their mods. Parlor modders are people who like to retain a large amount of control or some control over their work. They want to typically control where the mod is distributed, so they don't like it when someone takes their mod and puts it on a different website or platform without their permission, which you can understand why.
Yep.
And even some of them will go farther than that, where like there are certain modders in the community who don't even want people making patches for their mods for one reason or another. Sometimes it's because they want to control. I've heard people say that it's because they want to control the quality of the experience, like the user experience, right? And they're not confident that someone making a patch for their mod will have the proper care and attention to detail or whatever else. I don't know. You'd have to ask them as to exactly what their reasons are. But the Parlor analogy is that a Parlor modder has a storefront, their Parlor, where you are permitted to come in and receive a product, but only under the careful supervision of the store owner. And then you kind of leave that person's mod store and then go somewhere else.
Right.
That is contrasted against Cathedral modders, which are typically much more. Cathedral modders are a lot more lax about how their mods are used. I'd say a lot of them still don't particularly like when their mods are redistributed without permission. But sometimes they don't even care. They just say, here's my work. Go ahead, use it however you want. A lot of them will say, please credit me if you do, but then some don't even care about that. And their whole goal is to have other people treat their mod as a brick that can be used in building a large cathedral. And that's where the name comes from, where if all of us are offering our work freely to all the other users and modders in the community, it allows us all to kind of build this large, beautiful cathedral together that we could not individually build, or that we would be much harder to build if everyone had the Parlor philosophy. Right.
No, that makes sense. And to me, it seems like with something as large as Ultimate Skyrim, you would require a lot of Cathedral modders to support it.
Yes. On the whole, so Ultimate Skyrim is kind of an interesting thing. I call it a mod pack for the just simplicity's sake.
Right.
But so mod packs are historic. The word mod pack is kind of historically a dirty word in the Skyrim community. The reason for that is because typically the way that mod packs have worked is there's a lot of people out there who can do like what I do, making the mods work together. And it's way simpler for modders and users, for mod pack creators and users, to just edit the Skyrim installation so that everything works fine together, to package that entire installation as like one, quick, easy package, and then to give that package out to users. It is way easier from the user perspective, but it violates a lot of the permissions that modders will assign to their work. And most of the time, these mod pack creators, the thing is that when you're releasing your mod pack, if you want to keep within the kind of the permissions of the community, or if you want to keep in the good graces of the community, you would have to go and get permission from every single one of those people who don't want their mods redistributed. You would need their direct permission. And mod pack creators typically have not done that. They've just kind of packaged the whole thing, distributed it, and said, credit to the mod authors whose work is used in this pack. And for Cathedral modders, they might not care, probably won't care. For Parlor modders, they do.
Right.
And it's tough to tell them that they shouldn't care when it's their work being used.
Right.
You know? So wherever you stand on it, that is why mod packs have typically not been well received within the Skyrim community, for better or for worse. Ultimate Skyrim is a little bit different because it doesn't rely as much on whether or not a modder is Cathedral or Parlor, so to speak. And the reason for that is, I mean, it still kind of does, because if someone were to come along, you know, like a mod author, and say, I don't like that Ultimate Skyrim uses our mod, I want you to take it out, we'd pretty much have to do that.
Right.
Because that's how it goes, at least for the time being. But what Ultimate Skyrim does, which is different from the mod packs, is it doesn't redistribute anything. It doesn't break any permissions anywhere, because the Ultimate Skyrim installation process has users downloading and configuring the mods themselves, just as they would if they were, you know, operating without any sort of help or guide at all. It just provides a guide that shows you exactly what to download, exactly how to install it, and just walks you through every single portion of the installation process, so that you are ending up with the quote-unquote Ultimate Skyrim installation you have at the end is identical to the one I have on my computer by virtue of the instructions.
That's cool. I mean, it's a neat way to kind of, I don't want to say skirt around the controversy, but
it's very similar to that.
Yeah.
I would say calling it skirting around the controversy is a pretty accurate term. It was definitely my goal with it. I don't know. It's tricky because on the one hand, it's self-interested, right? Because if I were to violate these permissions and whatever, the health of the project is at stake.
Right.
And also from a moral reason, Ultimate Skyrim could not exist with the work of the modders whose mods it utilizes, right?
Right.
So if they don't want their stuff distributed, I'm completely uncomfortable with doing that, or with going around them. I would never want to do that.
No, I totally understand.
Yeah, it's a tricky scenario. It's cool that it doesn't violate any permissions and that it's all above board. I think that has been kind of the linchpin, of the success. The other trade-off is that Ultimate Skyrim is still a big old pain in the butt to install.
Right.
There's a lot of room for user error, or just, I mean, even if you are reading every instruction just very carefully, the whole process will take you like hours and hours, because you have to download those mods individually and you have to install them yourself as of now.
Right.
So that's the trade-off, is that something like a mod pack, you just download it, you're good to go. Something like this, you have to spend all the time doing it yourself. Though I will say that it does warm my heart every time I hear of a user who, you know, I can't tell you how many people I've seen come by and say that installation process was absolute. It was so horrible, but I'm so happy that I did it, because the experience is worth it at the end. And that just makes me feel so good. And hopefully it won't be as bad soon, because we are working on some ways to simplify it that still don't violate any permissions or anything like that.
I totally can understand and as a content creator, you know, I can see that angle where you see the person who is using your content or viewing your content, what have you. Mm-hmm. When you realize that you have actually reached someone, it is a great feeling. And
absolutely.
I'm glad that you've kind of been able to get that from multiple fronts. You know, you have your channel, and now you have this endeavor, which is really turning. It's taking a game that it's 7 years old at this point, and really breathing new life into it.
Oh, thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate it. I agree with you. That feeling it's really wonderful. I know we've both experienced it quite a few times. Just something. It's just so refreshing, and I don't know, man. It really puffs up your sails when you spend a lot of time and effort on a video or on a project, and someone comes by and says that they enjoy it for like the very reasons that you put it together. You're just like, yes.
It takes no effort for somebody to just drive by and shit on something, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's no effort. You know, they can just come in and they can lay down their dirt and peace out, and they don't even have to sit around for
like a response.
The response. Their damage is done. But when you find somebody who is willing to take the time and actually talk to you and say, hey, man, that thing you did really made my day,
Yeah.
That's the stuff right there.
Oh yeah, it's really unlike anything else. I think it's a big part of the reason why I do this stuff. Anyway, for better or for worse, whatever that says about me. It's like I talk to Liz all the time about like the role of validation, right? Like in the creation process.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I would still be doing what I'm doing without validation, but God knows it's so nice when you get it, and when you poured your heart and soul into something, and someone comes by and says, "Hey, I really like this." You're just like, "Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you so much."
So, before I let you go, do you have any thoughts on tackling any other game? Is there any urge to go outside of Skyrim? I mean, not right now. Obviously, you're very in the throes of 4.0 and all that, but in your heart of hearts, is there a game out there, off in the future or that has been released in the past that you would actually like to take the hatchet to?
Absolutely. The answer is absolutely yes. I think I've talked about it with my community like several times. A lot of the Bethesda RPGs fit that. Like I would love to do that with Morrowind. Oblivion is a little different because I don't know as much about the modding community. Like the willingness to do that is there for many different games. Or at least the willingness to see how viable something like that would be, right?
Right.
A good example of that is so I just started playing Fallout New Vegas for my channel. I had dabbled with Fallout New Vegas back when it came out. I think that was just before I went into college or right after I had started college.
Right.
And I really enjoyed my time with it, but I kind of fell off and just never finished it for one reason or another. And since then, there's also been this huge modding community that's cropped up around Fallout New Vegas. And so I see that, and I see, because you can go on the Nexus, right? And you can see all of these different mod communities that have sprung up around all these different games that I absolutely love. And every time I see that, I get this idea of like, what if somewhere down the line, I could kind of take this similar treatment of Ultimate Skyrim to these games as well.
That would be cool.
It would be absolutely amazing. The logistics of it is tricky. When I think about realistically doing that, I think about how much time. I mean, obviously, like you said, we're still very much in the throes of development of Ultimate Skyrim, and there's still a lot left to do there. But in some hypothetical future where either development has slowed a little bit, there's not as many things to add, where the installation process is not as cumbersome, and we are not required to provide so much support to users as we do now, I think it would be really awesome to take a look at some of these other modding communities for these games I really enjoy. Games like Morrowind, maybe Fallout New Vegas, even games like The Witcher, or games like I've been playing Kingdom Come, right, which has been a really fun experience. And I'm still very much kind of in the throes of that first vanilla playthrough, right, where you're not nearly into it enough to have pulled down the curtain far enough to see what needs to be changed and what doesn't. But I can anticipate the sort of mods that might show up one day.
Right.
And in that scenario, I'm always thinking about like, oh man, I wonder what an ultimate Kingdom Come would look like, or an ultimate,
Ultimate
Morrowind
New
or
Vegas.
whatever. Ultimate New Vegas. I have people already talking to me, would you ever do an Ultimate New Vegas? And my answer is maybe, but the willingness is definitely there.
A nice, soft maybe.
A nice, soft maybe.
Dylan, thank you so much for talking to me today. Could you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet?
Yes. So you can find my channel. That's just youtube.com/Belmont Boy. I believe there's an underscore between Belmont and Boy. Actually, both might work. I'm not sure about that. So that's a kind of a primary hub. You can also find us on Reddit at reddit.com/Ultimate Skyrim or /r Ultimate Skyrim, whatever it is. Those are the two major hubs, I would say. And beyond that are other, and then the Discord. We have a Belmont Boy Discord server that I link in most of my video descriptions. Should be pretty easy to find. Between those three places, that's your primary way to get a hold of me or to participate in our communities.
Very cool. And just to confirm, both underscore and no underscore work.
Oh, check it out. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it. because I forget which one it is daily.
Dylan, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening today. You can follow me on Twitter at @thearcadologist. My next episode will be about Dungeons and Dragons and a Satanic Panic. And my next video will be about the history of Suikoden. Take care, everyone.